Evening, everybody. So, I just grab a drink. My eye is watering really bad. So, welcome to another Friday with Ask Wednesday. Anything. Let's invite some people on. I already have a question to answer that was asked earlier today on my live. So, let's get some people on. Hello. How super fun are Fridays? I bet you can't guess next week's character. So, hi. So, welcome to another live episode of Ask Me Anything. So, I've only had one question sent in, but you can ask anything while I'm live. I'm live until 9 o'clock. We are at 9:20, so I'm a little bit late. Apologies for that. We kind of had to sort out the wardrobe malfunction. So I'm going to give people a few minutes to jump on. Hi, Nat. I'm still very congested, by the way, guys, so if I keep sniffing up, that's why. And I do apologise if nobody likes the sound, but it cannot be helped. Let's get some more people in. Anybody Addams Family fans or Wednesday Addams fans? So we've got 5 of you in. I found my hat finally as well. I've had this hat for a while. In fact, this was one of the first pieces of merch that I owned from my own range. Hi, Chris. Let's see who else. So while I'm inviting people, please hashtag live if you are watching live and hashtag replay if you are watching on the replay. If you have a specific question, please ask it. It does not have to be related to OCD. It can be absolutely anything you want. Please keep it, well, I say PG. Please keep it polite and respectful. Anybody who puts in the comments anything rude will have their asses booted faster than they can say Wednesday. Cool. Hi guys. Hi Kelly. Hi Stacey. Hi Chris. This amazing Wednesday Addams is a great character she is, isn't she? What is the worst thing that triggered a more severe OCD episode, and what help was available from what services, and did you find it helpful? Great question, Chels. I love that one. So, there's only 2 really significant episodes. I don't really like to say episodes because that then leads into that there's potential for more episodes. So with OCD, there's hi Heather, there's a potential for lapses and relapses. Both are completely different. A lapse is a temporary return of symptoms where somebody implements their tools and strategies that they've learned to successfully manage it. So a little bit like a road bump. And a relapse is when it's more significant and it requires intervention from medication, therapy, or a combination of both. So it is referred to as lapses and relapses. Good to see you too, Chris. So probably the worst, when OCD was first triggered, that was super tough because everything, all of my fears were centered around Isabella at the time because I only had Ashley and Bella. And that was super tough anyway. But once I kind of educated myself, went researching, reading books, finding out more about what was going on, by the time I was offered therapy, I was pretty much over the worst of it. However, I didn't have the correct tools and strategies in place to manage any lapses because when it came to therapy, I'd worked through it that well that according to the therapist at the time that I really didn't need it because I understood what it was, and his advice was basically to go and get pissed in the pub because I don't drink, and there's a specific reason why I don't drink, and I will share that a bit later on. So his advice was to go and get drunk, which coming from a therapist I don't actually think was really good advice, but there you go. And then I was signed off, so I didn't actually receive anything. The most significant, the most extreme, so I'm going to read your question back. The worst thing that triggered was reading about suicides on social media. There was a couple of really tragic losses from people that I knew from towns that I'd lived in. It was also on the news, so Avicii's passing was around the same time as well. A lot of stuff was coming up connected with Chester Bennington. For those of you who don't know who Chester Bennington is, he was the frontman of Linkin Park. There was stuff always cropping up about Robin Williams. Hi babes. And at that point I was already feeling quite low. I had a touch of what's known as the winter blues or seasonal affective disorder. I wasn't really going out, and maybe there was a touch of postnatal in there as well. And all of that mixed together, I had the random thought that maybe I was kind of better off not here. And I can talk about it really openly now. It used to really trigger me. I could never say the word suicide because there's still such a taboo about it. And it's not, although we're working towards being able to speak openly and raise more awareness in suicide prevention, which is why I've done suicide prevention training. The word itself I could never really say out loud because if I said it, it would mean that it was a confirmation that I was, and actually was really terrified. So it wasn't actually an obsession about causing or creating harm to myself. It was actually a fear of living life, because what if one day I'd had enough and I did it, and I was absolutely terrified. The guilt towards the kids, I was in a constant state of feeling afraid for myself and wanting to keep myself safe. One particular evening, I had the overwhelming need to get rid of all the tablets and things in the house, even right down to Rennie's heartburn tablets. I did not want them in the house just in case. So here I was, kind of pretty erratic, scouring the house for any kind of medication, and I was like popping them out of the packet into my hand to get rid of them, because if they were in my hand for too long, what if I was overcome and I take them? So I was actually putting them in really strategic places where I knew I couldn't go looking for them, where it would literally destroy the tablets. So some went down the toilet, some went in the wheelie bin, because realistically I ain't gonna go diving in a wheelie bin. So I was really, like I say, I was really strategic about it. I was hiding objects that could have been used to cause self-harm. I was hiding them in cupboards. I didn't want to see them. Hi guys. Didn't want to see them. They was too risky. They posed too much of a threat, when actually they were just objects. It was me and the OCD experience I was having that was turning these objects into something more dangerous, more sinister. Unfortunately, the experience that come after that, so I did reach out to the crisis team. That was not particularly helpful, because all they would say is think about your children. That level of guilt is never healthy. It really does not help to add guilt on top of the way somebody's already feeling. They already feel a huge level of guilt and shame as it is. They already feel like a bit of a burden regardless of what's fueling it. So I didn't find that helpful. I did ring the hospital. I rang the Samaritans, and the first time that I actually rang the Samaritans, they rang social care. A social worker came out the next day, and this is why, part of the reason why I do what I do, and I share more awareness and I help to support people, because when that social worker came out, she had such a huge lack of understanding in what OCD was and how to recognise the signs and the symptoms and the behaviours and the language that I was using, that she actually sat and told me that she didn't think it was OCD at all, that she actually thought I was in denial, and that the moment I was unsupervised, I was going to create some kind of harm towards myself. Now, imagine somebody with such a fear of causing harm to themselves being told that they was in denial. It's hard enough having such a strong intolerance for uncertainty and not knowing something, not knowing whether you're going to act on your thoughts or not, without somebody in a position where I had no reason to disbelieve what she was saying. She was the professional as far as I was concerned. So then it added a new level of, what if I do the things that I'm thinking about? I'm absolutely terrified, and she's just pretty much confirmed it. So then she took me to the hospital. I saw the duty psych team there. They listened to what I'd said. However, before we went in, she said to me, please be open and honest about what you're experiencing, Becky, because I think you're so knowledgeable about OCD, you can convince people that you're fine when actually you're really not. So then I wasn't able to get any relief at all from the duty psych team at the hospital, because even though I thought I was being honest, the OCD latched on to what she had said and the fear, and I was like, but what if I have just really convinced them and they're going to send me home, and I've convinced them I'm okay, and actually something really bad is going to happen. And that's awful to do that to somebody. And this is why it's so important that people and society and communities and everybody understands what the disorder is, especially clinicians, especially duty psych teams, crisis teams, the Samaritans, that they have a good understanding of the disorder so that they can help support somebody, because the worst thing you can do is A, give too much reassurance, because then that's a compulsion, and B, when they start confirming fears or they tell somebody that they're a risk, because then that makes their fears believable when actually it's quite the opposite. You always have to remember, when it comes to OCD, the fears that the intrusive thoughts are spewing out are actually the opposite of what they want. They're not in line, they're not congruent with who they are, their values, what they feel is important, their inner being. Those thoughts are the opposite. They're ego dystonic. So there's two. There's ego syntonic. Those are things that are in line with what a person wants, and ego dystonic, which is why the thoughts are so horrific sometimes. I came across an article that was written by Dr. David Veal, or Professor David Veal. He's one of the top professors in the UK that specialises in OCD. He is based in London. His many notable self-help books, and him along with Professor Paul Salkowski's, who's the president of the BCAP, I think. BCAP? Yeah, I think it is. It's basically where therapists are officially accredited. He released a document for all clinicians, particularly in IAP services, where risk assessments within crisis teams and duty psych teams and the hospital and things like that, they have to make sure that when it comes to OCD, they're not unnecessarily risk assessing people, because it reinforces the fear. So an example that he used is somebody that had sexual intrusive thoughts. Now this person doesn't want those thoughts, doesn't want to act on them, fears acting on them, but by assessing their risk of committing these offences, what they're essentially doing is, yeah, you could do that thing, and it reinforces that, and it creates such a horrible cycle for people. And when we're accessing these services, we put such blind trust and faith in them to help us, that actually some do more damage than good, because they don't have the correct understanding. I'll get to your question in a minute, Chris. I also have another question that was sent in earlier, so just gonna scroll back to what Chelsea said. What help is available and from what services, and did you find it helpful? Crisis teams, unhelpful. Probably helpful to talk to when you're in crisis, but that's about it. When it comes to OCD, not so much. The duty psych team, again, they were okay. The duty psychiatrist was not helpful. She sat and said that she believed it was severe postnatal depression, which it wasn't, and said she was very, very worried that the level of anxiety that I was experiencing was going to cause me to act impulsively. So basically she was just saying I was going to act on my thoughts, and that is the worst possible idea or statement that someone can make when somebody's living with OCD, is to tell them that they believe that they're going to act, because that is the fear that we have, that the thing we are fearing, the obsession, is going to come true, that we're going to act on it, or that fear is going to actually happen. So you can understand why that would set somebody off in such distress. So that I did not find helpful. The community mental health team was not helpful. I suppose by way of giving some support and checking in, it's great. But when it comes to more specialised care, I think that's where there's a bit of a downfall. I didn't find it helpful going to a CPN once a month and just sat there saying what's working well, what's been going well, what hasn't been going well, what do you think you could do? it's not what's needed, but I understand why that service is there. The most helpful services that I've had access to is actually IAPT, which stands for Improving Access to Psychological Therapies. Most regions have them. I do believe Wales and Scotland don't. However, IAPT are the places where you can get access to more specialised treatment, such as DBT, your CBT models, ACT and commitment therapy, therapy for PTSD. They cover a really broad spectrum, and the therapists that you actually see there are trained in those specific areas, so that was the most helpful for me. So yeah, in my years I've come across many unhelpful professionals. So I hope that answers your question, Chels. Chris says, can I ask you something, Becky? I have a friend who has suicidal thoughts and she has a crisis team, but they say they don't really help her. Can you give any advice? She has also had the police save her a couple of times. I'm so sorry, Chris. Suicidal thoughts and suicidal OCD are two different things, so it's worth finding somebody that she can really open up to, that she can trust, that she can be vulnerable with, give them that safe space. And sometimes it's not about trying to help them out of the pit that they're sat in. Sometimes they really do need somebody to climb down and sit there in it with them until they feel ready to start taking those steps. And sometimes it's about just advising them and supporting them in taking those really small baby steps hour by hour, and making really positive suggestions on things that they can do to get them through that hour. And also encouraging them to access some really good professional help, because it's going to depend on what's underneath, what the driving force is for those suicidal thoughts. Also whether it's passive, whether it's ideation, because there are different levels. Ideation is kind of passing, where it's kind of temporary, and they usually come about where somebody feels incapable of managing a situation. When it's kind of passive, again, that leads into it's kind of situational rather than longer term. And then you also have active suicidality, where somebody is making plans and there is an intent behind it. But what I would say, sometimes it's about sitting in that space with them and just being there, rather than, you know, trying to encourage the steps of progress. Just at that moment in time, if what they need is someone to be there with them so that they feel less alone and that safe space, then sometimes that's what's needed. Yes, Chris, it can be a very horrible disorder when you don't know the tools and skills to work through it. Some people that are supposed to help actually make things worse. Yes, they do. Hi guys, what are 3 techniques would you give to parents to keep their behaviours less noticeable? What do you mean less noticeable? What 3 techniques would you give to parents to keep their behaviours less noticeable to them, like you do? A lot of my compulsions are no longer physical, so mine, if they do crop up, which is very rare, I only see very slight compulsions cropping up if I'm stressed, or if I'm going through something really upsetting. So even though I live in remission, that doesn't mean I've got rid of it. It just means it's well managed, and I actually manage to enjoy and live life without it being impacting on that. So a lot of mine are actually mental compulsions, but with the children, I stay present with them as much as I can. So if I do feel like these intrusive thoughts are cropping up more than they usually do, I try and build my kind of ERP exercises, if you like, around spending time with the children. Not that I use the children, but playing with the children is a great way to be present and enjoy being their mum. And previously, when it was cropping up and I had the physical compulsions, a lot of them were done at night time when they were in bed. Obviously, Ashley spends a lot of time in his room on his PlayStation talking to his friends and stuff. But when Bella was really small, before Rory came along, a lot of the compulsions were done at night time, and I used to go out an awful lot because the thoughts were focusing around harm towards her and really violent, unwanted thoughts. I used to go out of the house a lot in a bid to keep her safe and protected, because somebody wouldn't do something if they was in public. So the compulsion was, for me, was avoiding being alone with her. So it all kind of depends. When I say OCD is all one kind of, OCD is OCD, how it shows up for people is unique. So it depends on what obsessions they're having, what their compulsions are. But personally for me, a lot of those used to come out at night time, when the kids had gone to bed. She confides in me, but it breaks my heart when she tells me she gets those thoughts, and I'm terrified she'll do something. All you can do, Chris, is keep being there for her, keep being a safe space. Make sure you're taking care of yourself as well, because getting compassion fatigue is very much a thing too. So make sure that you are taking care of yourself too, and get sometimes the best way to help somebody and support them is to refer them on. So there are many people that come to me with challenges or difficulties that are not directly linked to OCD, and the best thing that I can do for them, instead of trying to help where that's not my area, sometimes the best thing to do is refer them on to somebody who can. Have a look at what outreach projects there are, not just helplines, because sometimes a helpline might not be enough and it needs somebody to kind of engage her in living life and doing the things that she enjoys, so she can start feeling that zest for life again, and doing things and looking forward to doing things with purpose again. But sometimes it is just about being that safe space for somebody and letting them talk, so that they feel heard and listened to, so they're not feeling on their own, like they're a burden, like they haven't got anybody to talk to about that, or feeling silly or stupid, or or feeling selfish. I think that's one of the worst comments that come up that I see on social media a lot, in social media posts, is that think of your children, you're only passing that pain on to somebody else. It's awful to say that to somebody, and it actually makes them feel much worse to have to pass that judgment. We all know that it does, but at the end of the day, taking your own life is a very, very permanent solution to a temporary problem. I'm proof of that. Even though mine was fueled by OCD and it wasn't actually something I wanted, it was still a very temporary situation. There are ways you can work through that. Keep doing what you're doing, Chris. You're being an amazing friend, but please make sure you're looking after you too. More than welcome. You can actually have multiple forms of OCD, which makes it worse. You can't have multiple forms of OCD. Hi Sarah. You can have multiple manifestations, so you can have multiple flavours, if you like, multiple themes, but OCD is OCD. Unless you mean like the subtypes, which is skin picking, hair pulling and hoarding, and body dysmorphia. Those four that I've just mentioned they are under the OCD umbrella, but they're actually a separate diagnosis. But OCD in general, there's not different forms, there's only all of the different ways that it can show up. So sometimes, with what Chris is describing there, sometimes you can experience, where are all these little flies coming from? Sometimes you can experience thoughts that are of a violent nature, sometimes you can experience thoughts of a sexual nature, or to do with germs or contamination or checking. Magical thinking is one. So sometimes it flips the script sometimes. So that's what Chris is that's what you mentioned in there, the different forms. And also OCD is not just thoughts, it can pop up as mental visual images, thoughts, feelings, emotions, intrusive emotions. So you can have an emotion triggered and be very, very confused over where that's coming from, and then it's almost like the backwards way round. So you can have a thought that then gives you feelings and you feed into the story, or you can have an intrusive feeling or emotion and then you attach an intrusive idea to it that doesn't actually fit in with it. There's no evidence to back it up. So sometimes it's just, OCD can be very, very sneaky. When you get used to one particular thought and you work through it, it can kind of flip the story so that it comes at you from a different angle, but it's still all the same. It's still all the same disorder. Hi Tracy, hi Courtney, more than welcome Chris. Always be your good friend Becky. I need to go. Alright, you take care Chris. Now that I get aggressive feelings when I'm out and I'm afraid to go out, exactly, so that's the avoidance compulsion coming in, because you're afraid of the aggressive feelings. But as we discussed, didn't we, that it's okay to feel feelings and emotions, even the ones that don't feel good. Emotions normally have a message to convey, and sometimes it's about kind of just exploring where that emotion's coming from rather than being afraid of it and running away from it, because what we resist persists and it will grow greater, so that feeling will start to feel more than it actually is. So, apologies. I had a question from Marva earlier that I didn't answer, and she asked, what was it? How to recognise if someone has OCD. So when I'm putting out this information for everybody to kind of learn and understand and have that opportunity to understand the disorder a little bit more, just in case one day you come across somebody that may have OCD that you can think, oh yeah, Becky talked about that, how can I help them? If you want to help them, obviously that's your own choice, but it just gives you a bit more understanding. So compulsions are the behaviours we do to the obsessions. So obsessions are usually the thoughts, the ideas, the feelings that pop up in the mind. The outward then is the compulsion. So they come as two areas. So you've got overt and covert compulsions. So overt compulsions are the behaviours that people can physically see. So they can be things such as excessive cleaning to the point where it's really erratic, and we're talking where people use bottles upon bottles of bleach and cleaning products and cleaning things that to somebody without the disorder can see there's no reason to do that, where it seems really senseless, but that to that person going through it, they are quite erratic with it, quite fearful, quite distressed, quite driven by it. You can have things such as checking repeatedly. Another big one is somebody that's constantly seeking reassurance. So what they may ask is, if their intrusive thoughts, say, are of a violent nature, do you think I'm capable of doing this? Or when somebody doubts their diagnosis and they think they have something else, which is something I've been through. I shared that this morning, that I spent nearly 12 months believing I had schizophrenia. Or with the suicidal OCD that I was experiencing, I was constantly asking people, I was actually seeking people out that either had a history of working within mental health, so I was very, very intelligent with it. I was asking specific people because I trusted their opinion and what they would say, because they were trained to do that. So I would constantly ask, do you think I'm a harm risk? Do you think I could do that? What, are they the actions of someone that is constantly trying to reach a certainty and some reassurance, where somebody says, no, I don't think you're capable of doing that. It's just a thought. Just push it out of your mind. Don't think about it. Ignore it, as we would, because actually, to those that don't really understand it, we want to help somebody not feel as distressed and anxious. It's a natural thing to do, to want to help someone, to help comfort them, when actually, when they're reassurance seeking, when it's a compulsion, it actually makes it worse. So it reinforces that fear. So then they will keep needing reassurance, and the level of reassurance that's needed will keep going up and up and up. And that's when it starts to become a problem with friendships, with relationships, and it can start to cause a strain. So excessive reassurance seeking, somebody that's constantly talking about it, constantly checking, constantly appearing to be quite anxious and distressed, looking for confirmations, researching, asking things, hiding stuff. So for example, with me, it was always hiding things so I couldn't see them, so that it wasn't a risk. There's loads of different ways. So if you go onto Google and you look overt and covert compulsions, it will bring the entire list up. Covert compulsions are a little bit more difficult to spot because they happen all in the mind. These are things such as mentally counting. Sometimes also a physical one can be where people use a specific word or set of numbers or set of phrases which they're trying to use to counteract those thoughts that are coming up. So covert compulsions are stuff that are really hidden. So hypervigilance is one, so constantly checking if the thoughts are there or not, whether they've gone away. But actually the moment that you start checking to see where they are, guess what's going to happen? You start having more of them because you've already put that suggestion there. So you're actually already thinking about them in a backwards way round. Checking emotional responses to things, so people may watch stuff, may read stuff to see how they react with their emotions. Hi Aish, hi Emma, hi Heather. There are neutralising, where we try to replace one thought with another to cancel the bad thought out, where that's almost like, I call it the Peter Pan trick. So where in the famous story of Peter Pan is think happy thoughts. So that attributes to one of the compulsions with OCD, one of the covert compulsions, where you try to think happy thoughts to cancel out the other one or to try and ignore it. Praying, using certain activities to try and ignore things instead of using those activities as a kind of a refocus tool, which can be really helpful in the early days, so that you can allow yourself to sit with the emotions and the anxiety and things that come along with the intrusive thoughts. So that is actually a really helpful way. It's just got to be done in the correct way. So there are lots and lots. Literally, I would be here all night if I named all of the different behaviours and compulsions that come up that are linked to OCD, but it gives you a good idea. But if anybody does want to learn more about that, they can literally look for overt and covert compulsions, and it will bring up a lot of information. Can OCD go into remission on its own? Yes and no. So the only way that it can really go into remission is if you work on changing the response and the reaction that you give in the thoughts. So sometimes you can gain temporary remission, I guess, if you're quite busy. So for example, when I was first diagnosed, I'd started with a makeup company, network marketing and direct sales on social media, and I was so busy with that I didn't actually have the time to sit and think of intrusive thoughts. Because I was so busy and so distracted, I never even really noticed them. So actually I wasn't giving them a reaction at all because I was too busy thinking of other things. So actually it did go into remission for some time, and when they would pop up, yes, they would cause quite considerable anxiety, but then again, because I was so busy and had something more important to do that I was enjoying to do, it kind of just, it was in the background. I was always aware that it was there, and then when I stopped doing that, when I stopped doing that business, I decided, you know, I'm going to come away from direct sales. 3 kids, it's not working out as well as I'd hoped it would. I'd taken my foot off the gas. I just had Rory at that time, so I couldn't put as much effort in, and it resurfaced. But that was because I hadn't done the work that I needed to do to help me manage through any kind of lapses. So that's how it ended up forming into quite a big relapse at the time, because I hadn't learned any of the skills that I needed to manage it when it kind of resurfaced. So when you take distractions, when they're used to escape it, when they're used to get rid of it, when you take that distraction away, the OCD will resurface and it will feel much more intense because you're kind of not prepared for it and you think it's gone away. So it really does hit you like a ton of bricks. But when you're using distractions in the right way, where they are planned in, where you sit with intrusive thoughts and you allow them to be there while you're doing things that feel important to you, then that can be really helpful, because then you're not doing it to escape something. So there's a difference between two. Yeah, sometimes I have moments where it seems like I don't even have OCD. Yeah, so sometimes it's not even there all of the time. So you have to think, in the grand scheme of things, when we're having that many thoughts going off in the subconscious, what percentage of those are actually OCD thoughts, and what are the ruminations that are coming from it because we're responding. So ruminating is another covert compulsion, by the way. So that's asking yourself lots of questions to try and reach a certainty. So the whole what if this happens, but then what if I do that and that happens, and asking yourself loads of questions that actually have no answers, and you try to figure it out and it just grows bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger with all of these questions, and you actually forget what the original question was. And ruminating is a really tough one. What I found in my experience with OCD personally, and working with others over the years with OCD, is that when somebody starts working on their physical compulsions and behaviours and habits, when all of those start falling away and they're no longer needed, they're no longer serving, you actually find that underneath there is all the hidden ones too. So usually what you'll find is somebody that has the diagnosis of OCD will have both overt and covert compulsions. It's just the covert ones are more hidden, they're more sneaky. They can be difficult to spot because they're not something you physically do, and because they're habits, they almost become an automatic they become an automatic response, because they're kind of ingrained, inbuilt, they become habits. So they can be more trickier to break. However, that's why I always say CBT therapy is the best, and actually it's clinically the only proven therapy that helps someone with their diagnosis of OCD. So there are many other therapies out there that can help manage the symptoms and give you some really good tools, but ultimately CBT is the way forward. And actually CBT can be applied to a range of different disorders as well, and diagnoses and challenges. So it's pretty, the model of it is pretty universal. However, it's the ERP that's also important. So you can't really do ERP on its own unless you've done the CBT side first, in understanding where those thoughts are coming from, getting to the root cause. Because if you think of it this way, if somebody goes straight in for ERP, that's like taking a weed and popping the top off. So can anybody, what did we used to call them as a kid? Wet the beds. So dandelion flowers. So when you used to pick them, it meant, hi, you're going to weed the bed tonight. So they were called wet the beds. Where I was born, where I grew up, they were called wet the bed flowers. So if you imagine OCD being a dandelion flower weed, the plant, doing ERP on its own without doing the CBT is like popping the head off that dandelion flower. It's still leaving the root, it's still leaving the weed. So guess what happens? It regrows, and you're just going to have to keep popping the top off these flowers. So it's really important that somebody gets the CBT side first, understands that, gets to the root cause, and that you can then learn to separate yourself as that you're not OCD, that OCD doesn't belong to you, it's not part of your identity, it's not part of who you are, but actually it's a diagnosis. When you get to that stage, then you can start working towards the ERP side. So it is really important that, people go for that, because many go for the self-help books and go in for ERP thinking that it's going to get rid of it. And that ERP will completely get rid of OCD out of their lives for good, which is actually not possible, because OCD is not actually a thought problem. It's the feelings and emotions. It's a feelings and emotional challenge or difficulty. We have thoughts, we're supposed to have thoughts. What the brain does is what we do with the thoughts and how we think about them, and what feelings we have from thinking about them, and what importance we give them. So it becomes, it's not actually a thinking problem. It's dealing with the emotional response side to thinking. We were talking about that today. Yeah, so I uploaded, for those of you who haven't checked out the website yet, we have an area, these little flies do my head in. We have an area on the website, theocdwarrior.com or .co.uk, depending on where in the world you are. There is a section on there where it's bonus content and freebies. So regularly I think there's 4 videos on there at the moment. When I'm asked really in-depth questions, I record them and I put them on there for everybody to benefit from them. No names are shared, like in this video, if people want to remain anonymous with the questions that they ask. So I do a video about them, and actually one of them was about setting the expectations for ERP, because many people rush straight to the self-help books. And do you know what? I did the same. I did the exact same because I wanted rid of it. It doesn't feel nice. Anything that doesn't feel good, we want rid of it. We don't want to experience that. We want to feel good. We don't want to feel horrible. So naturally we want to get rid of the thing that's making us feel like shit. So we reach straight for those self-help books to try and get rid of it, to try and switch it off, and it's counterproductive. It doesn't work. There is only one way through it. So when you're faced with a fear, there's no trick to get you out of it. You literally got to stand and face it and go through it and work through it so that it no longer is a fear anymore. Otherwise, if you keep running away from it, you're going to be running away from that fear for the rest of your life. So it's really important that you do the work. Heather said, Arian was picking dandelions around my neighbours. And you were talking about her, wet the beds. Is she going to wee the bed tonight? Sorry about that. I really can't stand people that try and glorify mental illness. I can't. It's not fun. However, really gross. However, I am appreciative for the experience I've had, and not in a way that I'm glorifying it or saying, whoa, look at me, I've got a mental health diagnosis, because that's not what it's about. I am thankful for the journey that I've had, because it has what I do now that's come from it. So the way I see it, that the pain I've been through with my own experience was kind of necessary to get to the point where I wanted to be in life, because prior to that, I was helping people a lot and trying to rescue them and fix them to ignore my own crap that was going on, because I wanted to feel good for doing something. It's in my book if anybody does want to pick up a copy and have a read. It's on Amazon. It's called What If, and all proceeds do go to the OCD Action charity. But yeah, I was doing that for such a long time, people pleasing, that actually I never gave myself an opportunity to figure out what my purpose was in life, what I was actually in existence for, aside from being a mum. And don't get me wrong, being a mum is amazing, it's so rewarding, and having a partner and things, but as an individual I lacked a sense of purpose. I didn't actually know what I was supposed to be doing, what I contributed to the world. I took a lot to get there, and when I'd had the experience and people started reaching out for support, sending messages, you know, where they'd said I'd really helped them because they felt like they were less alone, I finally discovered what my purpose was. It took me a long time to get there. So the way I see it, no, I haven't glorified OCD, but I am, hi Bethan, but I am kind of appreciative of the experience that I've had, because I wouldn't be able to do half of the things, well, I would be able to do it, but it likely wouldn't be in the same area. That's a good book name for OCD. What if? Yeah, I had a book cover in mind for that, but I ended up using a personal one during a time when I'd had when I was just coming through my relapse, so I felt it was a very significant photo to use. But I actually wanted to do the cover as lots of what ifs wrote out everywhere as like graffiti. But who knows, what if 2.0 may have that book cover. Hi Chase, no, it's Wednesday. It's Wednesday this evening, it's not Becky. Oh gosh, I wish this cold would bugger off. Has anybody else got a cold lately? Because it's driving me nuts. I need it to shift. I'm fed up of having a snuffly nose now. So yeah, glorifying mental illness is not great. The whole illness is based around what ifs, exactly. It's an intolerance of uncertainty. It's an intolerance of not knowing what the future holds. It's an intolerance of knowing that you can't predict an outcome for something or where life heads. And it really is about the way to combat a what if is to stop living in the future and start living in the present moment. So from one moment to the next. So in the next second that passes by, I am a different version of Wednesday or Becky, if you like, because we can't, as each second ticks by, we're already in the future. So we kind of evolve with each second that goes by. So really, we don't know what tomorrow may hold, and that's my toddler that's just woken up. We don't actually know what's going to happen in the future. I thought one hell of a sign. I said, oh gosh, I'm so sorry, Chase. Lots of TLC for you. Rinny's still snottering. Ugh, it's horrible, isn't it? I haven't actually been out as much because I'm kind of quite worried. No, I wouldn't say worried. I just wouldn't want to create anxiety or concern for somebody who really has fear over catching the virus. So I'd much rather stay at home. I am still getting out-ish, but not as much as I normally do. I wouldn't want to be the reason for someone's panic and anxiety. So I just think if I can prevent that in a small way, I will. It's the same as wearing masks. I'm actually exempt from wearing them. I wear them for other people because it's not just about me, it's about everybody else. But yeah, I don't particularly glorify mental health or OCD at all, and I really don't like people that, it's not that I don't like people that do, I don't like mental health being glorified, and I definitely think jumpers such as obsessive Christmas disorder is really not great. It's pretty bad. To be honest, I feel like I have an antisocial personality disorder because I don't any emotion at all. But if we say in the comments, we mentioned you feel aggressive, that's an emotion. You also said you can't stand people that glorify mental illness. That's 2 emotions. So actually, you're saying that you don't have any emotion at all. You actually do, because you've just conveyed 2 in the comments. So it's all about making sure. That's another trick with OCD. It has you doubting your diagnosis. So there's a reason why OCD is called the doubting disease. It makes you doubt everything. But yes, one of them is it makes you doubt the diagnosis and makes you believe that you have something else. And actually, I'm right there with you as well, Chris, because for some time I actually thought I had an EUPD, which, if nobody's familiar with those abbreviations, EUPD is an emotionally unstable personality disorder, because some days my emotions would be all over the place and it would cause such anxiety for me, but it was because I was trying to escape those feelings and try and get rid of them because they didn't feel good. So it wasn't the fact that I was emotionally unstable, it was because I was quite reactive to the emotions that I didn't want. Yeah, but I don't feel things like sympathy. I actually think you are capable of that. I think you're just telling yourself you're not. But I'm not one to assume anything, but I think particularly when you start researching what your diagnosis could be instead of OCD, that's when we really start kind of inwardly checking for all of those signs as a checklist. So one of them that came up for me was a fear of depression. So what I would do is I would research the shit out of depression, and then I would start being really hypervigilant over confirming all of the signs and symptoms with depression. So anytime I felt a bit low, I was like, oh, there's one, there's a sign, that's a sign of depression. Oh my god, I must be depressed. What else is there on that checklist? When actually, to get a diagnosis, it needs, for whatever diagnosis it is, it needs a combination of signs and symptoms and challenges that fit together to make that diagnosis. So feeling low and sadness on its own would not be enough to say it's clinical depression. It would need the other elements in there. And also, when you do officially get the diagnosis of OCD, that's typically done by a psychiatrist or someone who's trained, and they would have explored every other diagnosis before reaching that one. So they are trained, so there's no reason to actually doubt that. Yeah, it must be antisocial personality disorder. Might be, who knows? Or frontotemporal dementia. We've discussed this one before, Chris. So maybe it might be worth going back to the messages where we discussed that one, and actually have a look at the evidence that supports both of those. So you're saying it's not OCD, it might be antisocial personality disorder and dementia. Have a look, explore that. Is there any evidence to back up that belief? Or are we just trying to squeeze ourselves in the wrong part of the jigsaw puzzle? I've had that one before. It came with a conjunction of self-harm, obsession. Yep. It's really not great, and that's exactly what happened to me. But because that idea had already been put there by an ER psychologist, if you like, so duty team, they're usually called here in the UK, because she sat and said, this is severe postnatal depression. I was like, oh my god. So then when they gave me a benzo, otherwise in America I know they're called benzos, in the UK they're like diazepam, lorazepam, sedatives, that kind of stuff. So when she gave me that and said, I'm concerned your anxiety's too high and you're gonna act really impulsive, that's the last thing. She gave a certainty, which you absolutely should never do with somebody who's in crisis or distress with their OCD, is give a certainty, because yes, it gives a bit of relief, but it can also go the other way, and it can be very, very damaging. And sometimes, it takes a lot of work to come back from. So when I actually worked through the CBT, I was still left with a fear of postnatal, because then not long after I completed CBT altogether, and I was actually looking to work with duty teams and things to help prevent what had happened to me happening to someone else. I found out I was, no it wasn't, it was about 12 months after, I found out I was carrying little Iva, who's now 7 months old. So naturally the fear of developing postnatal depression creeped in, because that suggestion had already been put there, even though I knew it was OCD and not postnatal. There may have been a touch of it in there, however I didn't have postnatal with the previous two, so actually my risk factors were a little lower. I don't even laugh or smile very much, but who was it? Last night, an amazing guy called Chris, he works with entrepreneurs that are quite high up. It's all about, and it's something I also talk about a lot when providing support, is flipping the switch on the self-talk and actually having a look at the things that we're saying to ourselves. So if you keep saying to yourself you don't laugh or smile very much, it's going to be in the back of your mind all of the time, and your automatic response is then to be, you're not going to laugh, you're not going to smile, when actually you can flip that. How could you change that statement where you're saying I don't smile or laugh very much either? How could you flip that? I have the diagnosis of depression and generalised anxiety disorder. Me too. Not the depression, the generalised anxiety. It's not nice considering everything going on in the world right now. Becky knows how horrid my anxiety has been recently, so thankful for you. You too, sweetheart. And you are doing phenomenally, Heather, because honestly, looking at you, you would not know how much that affects you. Obviously, those closest to you do. But the fact that you have a dual diagnosis and you've come through a pandemic, and you have those gorgeous, gorgeous kiddies, you are doing phenomenally well, and you are an absolute warrior woman, and you know that. Chase says, you would think after battling OCD for 36 years I wouldn't fall for OCD's bullshit, but that real feeling is hard to shake even after all this. Yeah, it gets sneaky. It changes the narrative. Something I shared with someone earlier. If you think about it, OCD is a little bit like what I do on my lives on a Friday. I dress up in a different costume and play a different character every week, and that's exactly what OCD does. It dresses up in costume and it masquerades as different things, and it changes its script to try and latch on again, and it will keep doing it. We got to wise up. We really do have to work towards wising up to it and knowing that it's still the same thing, it's just getting really sneaky. So it's about being 2 steps in front of it and being just a sneaky back and think, haha, got you. OCD is the biggest April Fool's joke ever because it plays April Fool's 365 days of the year instead of just one. Plus my hair gets really greasy right quick and I'm full of fungal infections. Oh dear. The fungal infections, I would say go and see your GP about, because that would be a concern. And your hair, tell me about it. Mine gets greasy within about 2 days. Not now because it's shaved, and obviously when I'm in the shower and stuff it's quite easy to wash it and stuff. Wait until you're finished, I've got something really funny to tell you. Okay. I can't wait. I'm so snuffly, it's driving me nuts. Yeah, so mine gets greasy really, really quickly. It's always been the same since I was a child. It's just an overproduction of oil, and I get really greasy skin too, but you wouldn't tell underneath all of this makeup. But yeah, you know, that's not a bad thing. Jay, tell me. now this is my life, don't you two be doing that. That's not fair. So yeah, what was I saying? It's about just making sure that you have the right hair care in place, have a look at your diet, if you put in conditioner. So when I was younger, this is going to sound really mean, when I was younger, one of my parents actually used to wash my hair with washing up liquid because it constantly looked like it had a tub of lard wiped through it because it was constantly getting greasy all of the time. So they resorted to washing it with washing up liquid, which was not great. So you have to look at what hair care products you might be using. Sometimes if we're not really taking care of ourselves, you know, like if we're tired, if we're not eating right, guess where the final place stuff like that goes to? It's the hair follicles. And it's the same with traumas too. So after I had Isabella, and your son is shouting at Macapaka, that does not surprise me. When I had Isabella, she was a traumatic birth, so we actually ended up in emergency surgery to have her. And around 3 months later, a lot of my hair started actually falling out. I still actually have them. I have a couple of patches. I have one here. It's not a receding hairline, by the way, guys. I have a patch here and a patch here where my hair was, you know, it was constantly coming out in clumps. And James will put in the comments that I actually booked into the doctors not long after having Isabella because I was really worried about how much hair was falling out. And the GP sat and said it was likely due to the trauma. So even though it was planned surgery, and it wasn't trauma in the sense that it was an accident or anything like that, it was still a trauma to the body. And actually the final place that trauma comes out when your body's healing is actually hair follicles. And it's also the place where they test drugs to see if there's drugs in the system. So if there's none showing in typical urine drug tests, they actually check the hair follicles because that's the last place it goes to as it grows, as it's leaving your body. So sometimes it's about looking at things on the whole rather than I just have greasy hair. Is there something that could be contributing to that? Yeah, I should probably start eating better. See, I have an issue with shoulds. Flip it again. Honestly, it's so powerful. Stress-induced alopecia, similar, yeah. So it's trauma-induced. So traumas tend to make my hair drop out, particularly when I've had C-sections, and I've had 3 of those. So my hair is not my poor scalp. But yeah, flip shit. No, there's no need for shame, Chris. Honestly, just look at the way that we speak to ourselves. Everybody, when we're making statements like I should, we're shaming ourselves. And we're beating ourselves up for doing something, when you could change that statement where you're saying, yeah, I should probably eat better. You could say, actually, I'm gonna give myself some TLC, and I want to start eating some really nice food, and I can do that for myself. I can make a commitment for myself to eat good food and feel good about it, instead of, yeah, I should probably start eating better. Which one sounds better? It's a terrible habit. Here we go again. It's a habit. Yes, it's a habit. Is it a terrible one? No. We all do it. We all should. I catch myself all of the time. I'm like, shit. So I'm just like you when I do it. I'm like, shit. But honestly, let yourself off the hook. We all do it. It's human. But honestly, when we start flipping that switch and taking that shame away from it and empowering ourselves and think, actually, tomorrow's a new day. Tomorrow is a fresh new start where I can start doing something good for myself, because I deserve to eat. So you could say, Chris, I'm going to start doing something good for myself starting tomorrow, because I deserve to eat well. I deserve to feel healthy and enjoy my food. How much better does that sound instead of, I probably should start eating better? It's about how we're talking to ourselves. Treat yourself like your best friend. Obviously it has to be a really nice best friend. Don't choose don't choose an annoying friend that gives really bad advice. But what advice would you give to a best friend that you really care about, that maybe isn't eating as well as they should? See? That isn't eating as well as they could be, and you can see that it's affecting them emotionally, physically. What would you say to them? So you have to treat yourself with the same level of kindness and love and compassion as you would to somebody that you care about, because you should, you are your own priority. Take care of you and you'll start feeling better for it. But then saying that, I find it hard to enjoy healthy food. So enjoy unhealthy food. We had a massive takeaway tonight. 4 huge pizzas. It was a deal. It was one of them where it's like, we can't miss out on that. That's a cracking deal. 4 pizzas, 3 boxes of chips, all laid out on the sofa, not on the sofa, on the floor. And we all sat around and had a pizza party. Is it healthy? No. Did we enjoy it? Hell yeah. It's about dropping that shame. Even if it's unhealthy, if you enjoy it, allow yourself to have it. Because what happens, because a lot of people have actually asked me how I managed to drop the weight. So for some time after being on Romaron, I went right up to 14 stone 12, I think it was, so just under 15 stone from 10 stone 2. I have just got down to 10 stone 9 after 2 years. So I've not been on Romaron for almost 2 years. And and I've had a pregnancy in between that too. And when people ask what it is that I've done, have I dieted, or have I been eating healthy, have I been doing smaller portions? No. All I've literally done is change the relationship that I have with food. I don't deny myself the treats that I want to eat, them guilty pleasures, that bar of chocolate, Big bar of chocolate in the fridge for me is gone in 2 seconds flat. The share bags, they ain't sharing bags, they're a mouthful. I don't share my chocolate with nobody. I actually have a secret stash. And my other half is also a feeder, so anytime he goes to the store and he says, do you want some chocolate? I'm like, no thank you, he'll buy me some. So I'm pretty sure he's a secret feeder. But it's about the way we speak to ourselves and the relationship we have with ourselves when it comes to food as well. So if I wanted something unhealthy, I would have it. I wouldn't feel bad for it, because when we start denying ourselves certain things, we resist and we resist and we resist and we resist till it gets to the point where we can't resist anymore. And what happens? We actually end up eating more of it than what we typically would. We actually gorge on it, and then we feel really crap and shame ourselves even more because we gave in to temptation and we went and ate the things that we didn't want to eat. So then we feel even more crap, so then we may as well just carry on eating the crap thing because we fell off the wagon. So it's about changing your relationship with the stories that you're telling yourself and the beliefs that you're feeding yourself. It can be quite difficult because when you are used to certain habits, they're already wired up. So your brain is like, I like to call it Play-Doh. It's neuroplastic. So it is like plasticine. You can remold habits. So within that Play-Doh are all these wires, which are your neural pathways. Your neural pathways are your habits, thought patterns, belief patterns. And when the brain and the mind is so used to running off certain patterns and certain habits, it's a case of we have to start reinforcing a new one, and we have to keep repeating it so that the brain starts to recognize it as a new habit. And when it starts to do that, it sets up some new neural pathways in that big ball of Play-Doh for it to run along, and the other ones become pretty much obsolete. So they still remain there, they're just not in use, they're kind of dormant, we don't use them. But it takes repetition of introducing a new habit and staying as consistent as you can with it. But it's also about not shaming yourself when or feeling guilty or beating yourself up when you can't stick to when you've committed to changing or implementing a new habit. It's also about when you drop the ball or you don't manage it. It's about giving yourself some grace, because sometimes setting up new habits can be really difficult. That's where having some reminders are really great. Reminders on your phone, post-it notes, things where you can see them that can keep you being consistent and motivated, and that can have you keep practicing those habits. And it works absolutely for new habits when we're working towards remission with OCD. It's the same kind of process. Because of the OCD, I watch my sugar intake as well as fried food intake, and also foods with MSG have a tendency to aggravate my anxiety. Exactly. So sometimes there is foods that can interact with the chemicals that create the feelings of anxiety, that can actually kind of trigger that off. So if we're eating a lot of sugar and we're reaching for sugar for an energy hit, actually when the blood sugar drops, then we feel like crap. So that's another reason why it's, I do it a fair bit when I'm busy, where I reach for the convenient snacks to give me a bit of energy, but then I find the energy crashes afterwards are really tough. Hi PJ, are really tough afterwards and actually make me feel like crap. But I'll find when I've had a really good meal, I'm actually more energised. But yeah, fried food, it's just about having some balance. So not denying yourself the things that you enjoy, but it's about enjoying all the food groups and enjoying the things that you do have, and kind of finding that balance with it. One of them that I cut out, actually, Chase, as well, that's another connection there, is I cut out sugar and coffee. Well, I say coffee, I cut out caffeine, and I constantly looked for ways that I could change my diet, because I thought that would get rid of OCD. So you can see how sometimes the new habits that we start to look into to getting rid of OCD don't work when they're used to get rid of something. But as Chase has just said, they're incredibly helpful for helping to manage anxiety, especially where there are links between the two. Not only that, but when you feel overwhelmed with illness, cooking can be too much. Yes, it can. Is it okay if I add any of you on here? So Chris is saying, can he add any of you as a friend on Facebook? Yes, it is really tough when you're feeling overwhelmed with illness and with anxiety, so we can stay connected. Bless you. So everybody, Chris is asking if you can send any of you guys a friend request. So that's up to you guys. Don't feel obliged if you don't want to. That's absolutely fine. I'm sure Chris will appreciate either way. But yeah, cool. Please connect. Connecting is amazing. But now I get that, Chris. It's really tough to want to cook, to want to eat well. So with that, I would say have foods. Heather's just said absolutely. Thank you, Heather. I knew you would. It's about having things that are easy to make. Sometimes if anxiety in the past have been really bad, it's made me feel really nauseous, really sick, I don't feel like eating, I've had things, hi Drew, I've had things in the cupboard like cup of soups, tins of soup, stuff that are really easy to make. And if I need that energy, if I can't cook, I'll look at ready meals, but healthy ones. Pizzas. So when you're in that space and you're overwhelmed, it's less about eating healthy, but actually just making sure you have some food in your system, because as we've discussed before in a previous live, 90% of serotonin is actually created in your gut. So the serotonin that helps with emotional balance and regulation is created in the tongue. So you have to make sure you're eating. So even if that is garbage, please make sure you are fueling your body. It really, you know, one of the experiences of mine when I'd gone to the duty team at the hospital, when they'd asked if I'd eaten, and I hadn't actually eaten for nearly 4 days solid because I was so racked with anxiety, I couldn't make the connection that I actually felt worse because I wasn't eating. So his advice was to eat jelly babies. They said, please eat something, even if it's a packet of jelly babies, if it's a milkshake. You can now get yogurt drinks, you can get smoothies. There's loads of things that you can actually think, actually I'm going to buy a couple of those and keep them in the cupboard or keep them in the fridge, you know, your long life stuff. Keep them in the fridge, keep them in the freezer, because then if at any point I am really struggling, I know I don't have to worry about cooking for myself. I know that there are things in there that can be easily made, so I can make sure I'm still fueling my system and making sure that that creation of serotonin is still happening in the body. You can get packet soups now, the powdered ones where you add a pint of water to them. They're really tasty. If you get nauseous, so anxiety for me typically makes me feel sick first, and then it's the IBS, then it's feeling dizzy, then it's feeling sweaty, and then just horrible. I tend to stick to drinks, so like milkshakes, I'll go for those. Toast, I'll eat a lot of toast because it's, you know, it's not overwhelming, it's not overfacing, because sometimes when you've gone too long without something to eat, it's really tough to face yourself with a meal, so you kind of have to go back and start off really small and build yourself back up again. So there's a couple of suggestions there. My son lives on ready meals 75% of the time with his food aversion. I get it, hon, it's really tough, isn't it? I really get that because of the way Bella is. Coffee has never seemed to bother my anxiety. It's the only caffeine I drink. I gave up soda pop 4 years ago. I drink a lot. I really do have, I experience, or I have some really unhealthy habits. So I do drink a lot of soda and I drink a lot of coffee. They're pretty much the only liquids that I do drink, which is not great. But moving forward, I could, hi Rachel, moving forward, I could start implementing a glass of water every day, but I really can't stand water. I think it tastes vile. And loads of people say, well, it doesn't have a taste. It does. It really does have a taste. It's bland and it's boring and it's disgusting. But yeah, I can't go through a day without soda pop. We call it fizzy pop here. Does anyone else find that Coke goes down so nice with certain foods? Yep. I'm actually more of a Dr. Pepper girl, but it has to come out of a can. So you need water from Green Knock. It's so beautiful. I will look into that. I really do. I really don't like water at all. But yeah, I'm one of those people that has the opinion that pop tastes better when it comes out of a can rather than a bottle. So yesterday when I went live, yesterday evening, I had just finished a can of Dr. Pepper and I knew I was coming up to do a live, and being under this ring light is very, very warm. So I always have a drink with me. And I actually poured some Dr. Pepper out of the bottle into the can because it just tastes better out of a can than a bottle. That's okay, Becky. I love my potato chips and ice cream. Me too. Me too. But I also love cooking. Those of you that have tuned in on self-care, my self-care habits and stuff that I love to cook. However, that's becoming a little bit difficult now because the children are very particular in what they will eat and what they won't. So when they were much younger and I could get away with making things, now I kind of can. Raspberry Pepsi is lovely. Stop. I need to reduce how much soda I am drinking. You can't buy it. Next time I go, I'll bring you some. Yes, please. Oh, you don't do Dr. Pepper. Right, well, we can't be friends, Chris. We just can't be friends. You don't do Dr. Pepper. I'm joking. I am. I'm kidding. Right, what time are we on? Oh, it's 9:30. I have to go. So, I hope there's been some really helpful suggestions in here. I hope this has been really illuminating, shall we say. I don't want to say educational because I'm not a teacher. But I hope you've learned, those of you that are on the replay, please drop a hashtag replay. I hope you've learned something really valuable today. You've got another broader, oh shit, sorry. Don't apologise. It's me getting carried away. I just, like I said, I love being on live and chatting to you all and providing information where I can in a much more understandable way and a fun way as well. So yeah, I hope tonight has been really, really illuminating and you've learned something new and it's broadened your understanding of OCD and the signs to kind of look out for if you wanted to recognise OCD or if you come across someone in life in the future that may have OCD and what you can do to support them. Over here in the Midwestern and southern parts of the US, Dr. Pepper is the most popular of the sodas. Yeah, it is here, I think. That and Coca-Cola or Pepsi. But I also love Lilt, so I'm not sure if you can get that in the US. Lilt is probably, it's pineapple and grapefruit, I think. So, I hope everybody's enjoyed tonight. I will look forward to being back on live next Friday. I will be in a different character. Bet you can't guess who. And I'm going to start looking for some suggestions on who you want to see in character on lives in the future, because I actually had about 9 characters that I've cosplayed before, because I already have. So I've got about 3 more, so 3 more weeks, and then I'm going to start needing some suggestions. So that is going to be really fun to include you all. And I will be back on live Friday. Again, if there's any particular questions that you have that you want answered and it's an in-depth answer that you want, they do get recorded as videos and they do go over onto the website in free bonus content and freebies. So just pop on over to theocdwarrior.com or .co.uk and you will find them in there on the main page, so you can access all of them. There's 4 on there at the moment. Or if you have a question for next week, get them wrote down and send them me via inbox on Friday when I put the status up, and they will get answered whilst we are live. I really enjoy these talks. I really enjoy having you here, Chris. So, good night, everybody. It has been lovely connecting with you all again, and I will no doubt see you live next week. Peace out.